I know this is sudden, but can you stay at my place for a month, starting next month? This utterly unexpected request came from the newly transferred female chief who had suddenly called me in. It was more than enough to throw me into a state of confusion. This utterly unexpected request came from the newly transferred female chief who had suddenly called me in. We're not close enough for me to be living at her place. Excuse me. While I was taken aback, the chief blushed, fidgeting in embarrassment. Through this request from the chief, my life was about to take a significant turn. My name is Thomas Mason. I'm 32 years old and work at an elderly care facility. I've always loved interacting with older folks since I was a kid, being quite the granny's boy, so caregiving is the perfect job for me. However, the caregiving staff at work are mostly women in their 50s and 60s, and there are only 2 men, me and the chief. That's why the chief and I often take on heavy lifting, and I was a little dissatisfied with the unfair division of work. But I can't voice such complaints to female staff. The chief, who was the only one I could rely on, has already passed the age of 65 and will retire. Once the chief retires, will I help everyone with their work? Well, until now, the work was finished because the chief helped me with the work. Such thoughts filled my mind, and I couldn't help but sigh. Then, the chief retired in no time, and a 35-year-old female chief was assigned from another department. My name is Kay Scott. Nice to meet you all. When she introduced herself to us, I felt that Miss Scott suddenly looked surprised when her eyes met mine, and quickly averted her gaze. Then, she continued with her greeting. What's going on? Does she know me? But I don't know her. I started working, with a little strange feeling. Unlike the previous chief, the new chief did not seem intimidated by the older staff in their 50s and 60s and was not shy about giving work instructions. Helen, one of the residents is calling you. Please attend to them. Jessica, you left meal assistants halfway to guide someone else to their room, didn't you? Please finish one task before moving on to the next. The new chief was brisk in her directives and closely observed the movements of the caregiving staff, giving necessary corrections. There was no wasted motion in her work, and her directions and reminders were always on point. However, the queen bee staff, who had been there for many years, didn't like being instructed by a younger chief. She's acting high and mighty for being so young. She's getting carried away just because she's the chief. Complaints about the chief had become commonplace at work. And for some reason, the chief didn't give me any work instructions. It was as if she thought, you can handle things on your own, right? Even without her saying it. Seeing this, the queen bee staff members started complaining about the chief again. It's weird how she only gives us instructions and doesn't say anything to Thomas. She's probably just buttering him up because he's a man. Pathetic for a chief. Whenever I was in the staff room, I could always hear people bad-mouthing the chief. I was getting wary of hearing it, so I started spending more time chatting with the residents and less time in the staff room. However, being out of the staff room meant my paperwork wasn't progressing at all. I was getting tired of feeling like I didn't have a place at work and my work was not moving forward. That's why I asked her for instructions. What should I do? Is there any work that I can handle? After saying that, I approached the chief on my own. Then, finally, the chief said to me, "All right, then do this," and started to assign tasks to me. But the tasks given to me were things like changing sheets and cleaning the floors. It was obvious that these tasks were not caregiving duties, just odd jobs. Seeing me accepting these tasks from the chief, The Queen Bee staff members started bad-mouthing the chief again behind her back. That chief, she's definitely pandering to men. Changing the work she assigns based on gender and age, she's really a wicked woman. The behind-the-back talk from the Queen Bee staff members was only increasing day by day. I started racking my brain about how I could improve the relationships at work. During such a time, I was called by the chief to the conference room. Did I do something? I couldn't think of anything. Well, it doesn't matter. Since I was called by the chief, I might as well discuss the interpersonal issues as well. As I was walking towards the conference room with various thoughts, I noticed the chief fidgeting with an unusually embarrassed look. When I asked, is there something you need from me? She just kept looking down without saying a word. While I was watching the chief with curiosity, she finally opened her mouth. I'm sorry for the sudden request, but can you stay at my place for a month next month? What? I was confused by the sudden, unexpected request from the chief. I'm going on overseas training, so could you look after my cat for me? Saying so, the chief handed me her house keys, fidgeting with a bashful look. Ah, so that's what this is about. Although I understood, I felt a strange sense of urgency about this unexpected request from the chief. Why me? Aren't there other people you could ask? When I asked the chief that, she looked at me with a blush and said, there's no one else I can ask. That's why I'm asking you, Thomas, and gazed intently at me. Looking at the chief's embarrassed, yet serious eyes, I couldn't refuse. Well, if you're okay with me, I'll do it. As I muttered that, the chief's face lit up all at once. Really? Well, I'm counting on you next month then, she said, now, back to work, and walked out of the meeting room with a spring in her step. I could only stand there, dumbfounded, watching the cheerful figure of the chief retreat. No matter if she didn't have anyone else to ask, why me? I'm not particularly close to the chief. With those thoughts in mind, I returned to my workspace. It was strange that the chief would entrust all her personal and home matters to me, a mere employee. As I thought about various things, I felt strange about the chief's attitude and had a vague feeling. At the end of the workday, I decided I had to refuse the chief's request and stayed behind in the office. However, the chief was caught up in preparing for her overseas training. She was discussing the training with the office staff, receiving explanations about the flow of the day, meeting up with the translator, and so on. In our nursing home, there is an annual overseas training program for caregivers, nurses, and dietitians. They visit countries known for their advanced welfare systems, like Sweden, Denmark, and New Zealand, to observe and learn about their caregiving techniques in local hospitals and elderly homes. Usually, experienced employees attend to reflect on their usual caregiving tasks. But it seems that they couldn't gather participants this year. And apparently, the caregiver who was supposed to go suddenly couldn't make it due to a family matter. It was understandable then that the chief, who had recently transferred, was suddenly set to go on overseas training next month. As the chief busied herself with preparations for the overseas training, a month passed without me being able to say a word. The spare key she had given me still remained in my bag. The day before the chief's overseas training. Is she really going tomorrow? As I stared at the key I had received from the chief and thought about various things, the chief, who was about to go on her overseas training the next day, called out to me. Could you drop by my place after work today? From tomorrow, I'll be relying on you to take care of my home daily. Upon hearing the chief's voice, I ended up having dinner at the chief's house after work that day. For some reason, although I should be visiting the chief's house for the first time, the apartment building seemed vaguely familiar. I thought about it for a while, but in the end, I couldn't remember anything, and with a feeling of unease, I entered the chief's home. As soon as I stepped into the chief's home, something black flew across in front of me. What? As I stood there in surprise, the cat, which had been on top of the cat tower until a moment ago, dashed into the depths of the room with great speed. She's incredibly shy around people. She's never let any visitors touch her. The chief explained this while putting down her bag, donning an apron, and starting to prepare dinner. Wait a minute, I've never owned a cat before. There's no way I can take care of one that's so timid. When I voiced my concerns, the chief waved me over to the kitchen and said, "Come over here." She then proceeded to teach me about the proportions and timing for preparing cat food and water. She even showed me how to clean the litter box. But even if I understand how to take care of her, I don't think I'll be able to bond with her. When I voiced this concern with a sigh, the chief responded, "You don't have to force yourself to get along with her. Just make sure you feed her and take care of the litter box. That's all you need to do." I was overwhelmed by the chief and reluctantly said, "I understand." I learned only the basics of cat care from her. Then, the chief hastily cooked dinner for me and left early the next morning for an overseas training program. The next day, I continued with my regular work as usual. Today, as well, I was busy with work, and before I knew it, it was past the regular time. "Oh, no, I have to take care of the cat," I exclaimed and quickly stood up, hastily clocked out, and headed towards Chief's house. When I arrived at the house, a swift black figure dashed past me. Looking up, I saw a cat tower next to the front door, and from it, the cat jumped down and fled into the room. Is it okay to jump down from such a high place? If this continues, she'll eventually get hurt. Saying so, I went into the room to replenish the cat's food and clean the litter box. As I did this, the cat was watching me intently through a gap in the sliding door of the bedroom. Come to think of it, I hadn't asked the chief for the cat's name. I took the liberty of naming her Fluffy and tried to beckon her over, but the cat hissed in intimidation. I worried that this situation might be causing the kitty some stress. I said to her, "I'm going home now, make sure you eat your food," and left Chief's house. For about a week, I went over to Chief's place daily. The cat seemed to find it strange that I, a stranger, not its owner, was visiting the house every day to feed it and clean its litter box. Slowly, she started venturing out from behind the sliding door of the bedroom, tentatively sniffing my back. However, she would jolt and retreat back to the bedroom whenever I moved. Despite this, I felt like I was gradually closing the distance with the cat. In order not to startle her, I'd carefully place a treat in front of her, keeping my movements to a minimum. Then, even though she'd contemplate returning to the bedroom for a moment, she'd sniff at the treat and take a bite. With such persistent efforts, the cat started to come near me. She would sniff the hem of my clothes, back hunched in caution. She would surely bolt at an incredible speed if I made any sudden move. I was unable to move, frozen in place for several minutes. But today, I started work early at 7 a.m. and worked overtime. I ended up missing my lunch break and was famished. I desperately wanted to eat something, but I couldn't move. My hunger eventually won over, and I decided to move slowly. The chief had previously told me, "You can eat anything you find in the house." I got up as if in slow motion and went to the kitchen. Then, I opened the refrigerator and scanned its contents just with my eyes. For some reason, the cat did not run away, but slowly followed me, then just sat there watching me. I couldn't figure out what to eat, so I pulled out a fruit jelly that the chief had bought and placed it on the table. The cat, from under the table, looked up at me curiously as I sat there eating the fruit jelly for dinner. With all of this going on, I naturally became closer to the cat, and before I knew it, she didn't run away even when I touched her. In fact, she began to rub against me and purr. I had no idea why I was so favored, and of course, I couldn't ask the cat. I was filled with a sense of wonder, as I'd never touched a cat before. I was fascinated by how soft and comforting the cat was. Without realizing it, playing with Chief's cat had become my only source of comfort after a hard day's work. Today marks the final day of the Chief's overseas business trip. As always, I looked forward to playing with the cat and headed over to her house. Unusually, the cat was waiting for me at the entrance. "Ah, a welcome party, thank you," I said to the cat, giving it a scratch. As I was doing so, I felt something odd on my hand. What's this? Was this here before?" I thought to myself, feeling the cat's belly once again, and there it was, a lump, small like a marble. I don't know anything about cats, but the thought of the cat being sick filled me with anxiety. In a panic, I looked for a 24/7 veterinary clinic and rushed there. To my surprise, the vet's eyes widened in shock. "This seems to be a skin tumor. At this size, it would be very difficult to find unless you're frequently touching and checking the cat's body. Good find," he said. With a reassuring smile, he continued, "Given the small size, we can likely remove it completely with immediate surgery. We'll have to look at the pathology report for certainty, but we should schedule the surgery as soon as possible." Despite being a popular clinic with a 1-month waiting list for surgeries, it turned out there had been a recent cancellation, so I could book the surgery. I scheduled the surgery right there, and given my worry about the cat, I decided to stay at Chief's house for the night. This house, it felt familiar somehow, but it wasn't a place I knew. With that thought nagging at me, I laid down on the living room couch, petting the cat until, before I knew it, I fell asleep. The following day, the chief returned from her overseas training. "Was everything okay? Did anything happen?" The chief rushed over to me with a worried look. "I'm fine, but..." I stammered, then told her about the cat's illness. "What, you noticed that?" The chief was surprised that the cat, who usually didn't let anyone else touch it, allowed me to pet it daily. After her overseas training, she returned to a whirlwind of preparing for a presentation at a meeting and arranging for the cat's surgery. The cat's surgery, which I was worried about, was a success. The results of the pathological examination revealed that it was a malignant tumor. However, because it was discovered early, the cancer was completely removed, and the possibility of metastasis was considered very low. When she finally had a moment of calm, she wanted to thank me again, and I was invited to her house. As soon as I arrived at her house, the cat, with its eyes shining, approached me with its tail up. Watching me and the cat, who kept rubbing up against me fervently, the chief started to speak. "You've always been such a perfect gentleman, even back then. I can see why my sister and the cat chose you." I widened my eyes and asked, "What do you mean?" But as I looked at her face, I remembered something. I was always a bit more mature than my classmates in elementary school, partly due to my physical build. I know it might sound weird to say this, but I was a bit of a heartthrob and was quietly popular among the girls. In the 6th grade, I became an official couple with my first love, and our relationship lasted until middle school. Looking at us, her sister would watch us with an envious look, like "You guys are lucky." Could it be? "You're the sister of my first love." When I said that to the chief, he laughed with a bright smile and said, "Did you just notice?" Then, she told me a story. After my first love and I broke up in middle school, her parents divorced. Her sister went to live with their mother, and the chief went with their father. Their father passed away from cancer a few years ago. She hasn't been able to get in touch with her sister or her mother. Feeling left behind and lonely, Kay started keeping a cat a few years ago. This house is actually her childhood home, but it's changed a lot recently as the area has been developed into a new residential area. The apartment was also renovated, which is why I didn't recognize it. To distract herself from her loneliness, she had been putting on a brave face at work. And then, she was transferred to my apartment, and we were reunited. I secretly had a crush on you as I watched how seriously you cared about my sister. Saying that, the chief smiled shyly. Unlike when she was at work, she had a really kind and cute atmosphere. I felt an electric shock course through me, blindsided by this unexpected revelation of our past connection. From that moment, I found myself frequently visiting her house to see the cat. You've done so much for the cat. It's gotten much better thanks to you. I can't thank you enough. She'd repeatedly expressed her gratitude, to which I replied that I wanted something in return. When she asked what I wanted, without missing a beat, I pointed towards the entrance hall and said, "I'll take that." She looked confused until I held up the spare keys to her house. This is what I meant. Understanding dawned on her and her cheeks flushed a sweet pink. She was so cute that I hugged her. From that day on, our relationship officially started. "Just keep it quiet at work, okay?" she asked shyly. I noticed a softening in her personality since we started dating. Hasn't the chief been particularly nice to us lately? Maybe something good happened. Has she got a boyfriend now? As I watched her laugh off the remarks from the queen bee staff, I felt a sense of relief and couldn't help but smirk. I hope you enjoyed the story. Subscribing to the channel can be a great motivation for us. See you in the next video. My name is Mark Johnson. Along with my wife, Susan, we run a public bathhouse, a business inherited from my grandfather's time. We had a fateful encounter with a child. It was on a day in early spring when the chill still lingered in the air. It was a little past 9 o'clock in the evening. Having seen off the last customer, I was preparing to close the store with my wife. I left the indoor cleaning to Susan and went to take down the entrance sign when I spotted a small figure near the trash dump located a little way off from our shop. Under the glow of the street lamp, I could see a raggedy girl rummaging through the garbage. At that time, I thought the girl was just searching for something. But considering the late hour, I thought I should say something to her. I called Susan, and we approached the girl together. As we got closer, we saw a girl in a thin long-sleeve shirt and skirt, barefoot, in the cold season when a jacket would still be necessary. Although she wore sneakers, they didn't fit properly, and she was stepping on the heels. Surprised by her appearance, both Susan and I could do nothing but gawk, until I finally spoke up. "Little lady, it's quite late. Are you looking for something?" Perhaps startled by being addressed so suddenly, the girl flinched and turned towards us. Her hair, slightly longer than shoulder length, was messy, lacking the luster typically seen in a child's hair. Her bangs were long, obscuring her eyes. "I'm hungry," she replied. Hoping not to frighten the jittery girl, I gently addressed her. "So you're hungry, huh? But it's late. Let's call your house. Do you know your home phone number? We can phone your mom or dad to come pick you up." But the girl shook her head vigorously. "I get it. It's scary to go to a stranger's house, isn't it? How about this? We'll call your folks while we wait together here." Since it was late, I thought she might be suspicious of us. However, the girl confessed. My mom hasn't come home for about 3 days. I've been waiting for her to return, but I'm so hungry. Her words led me to suspect possible neglect or abuse. So, how about we call the police and you wait here a bit? I asked. No, not the police. Mom said no to the police, she exclaimed. The mention of the police seemed to put her on guard all at once. Just when I was contemplating calling the police despite her reluctance, we heard her stomach growl. Susan was the one to break the silence. Are you hungry? When did you last eat? I haven't eaten since this morning. That's why I was searching for some food, she replied. Susan and I were lost for words. A girl in thin clothes, rummaging for garbage at night, having not eaten all day, was a heartbreaking sight. Would you like to come to our house? Susan proposed. I was surprised by her words. Taking a child home without contacting the police might lead to complications later. Perhaps sensing my concerns, Susan looked at me and said, I understand your reservations. As adults, it may seem right to call the police, but how can we leave a child out here, shivering from the cold and hunger? I resolved myself when I heard my wife's words. If the girl is resistant, we can go to the police tomorrow. The most important thing right now is to provide this shivering child with a warm place and a meal to fend off her hunger. I put on a smile and reached out my hand to the little girl. Come home with us, it's okay. The girl seemed hesitant for a while. But after some time, she took my hand. My wife held the girl's other hand. And so, the three of us hand in hand, returned to the public bathhouse. It seems the girl's name is Alice, or so she says. Upon returning to the bathhouse, my wife and little Alice went to bathe together. In the meantime, I went to prepare some clothes. Alice's clothes looked cold and dirty. They were no longer wearable. I brought some of my wife's clothes. A coat, shoes, and pants with a string. With the string, if tied tightly, she should be able to wear the pants without them slipping off. I quickly ran to the convenience store and bought some small-sized women's underwear. I also picked up a toothbrush while I was there. By the time everything was ready, my wife and Alice had come out of the bath. The underwear and clothes seemed a bit large, but she managed to put them on. The girl who came out of the bath had color back in her pale face and looked more like a child. Her hair, now washed and dried, was softer than before. But her long bangs were unmanageable, so my wife held them back with a pin. Underneath her long bangs was a cute face that had been hidden. Are you feeling warm now? When I asked, Alice nodded several times. She seemed excited. You know, the bath is huge. It's like a swimming pool, and it's so warm. I've never taken a bath like this before. I felt relieved seeing her smile as she spoke. I was worried because she was expressionless, not like a child at all, when we met her at the garbage dump. While I was drying Alice's hair, my wife was preparing a meal. Our house is right next to the public bathhouse. After Alice and I finished drying our hair, we moved to our house next door. There, my wife served the meal she had prepared. It was a warm pot of soup. The girl's eyes sparkled at the sight of the soup, filled with vegetables, meatballs, and noodles. Can I eat this? My wife smiled at Alice's question and said, feel free to have as much as you want. After that, she ate a lot. My wife gave her a fork and a spoon because she was spilling some food as she struggled with chopsticks. She may have never been taught how to use chopsticks. It's delicious. I haven't had a warm meal in a long time, said Alice. Thinking about the environment she must have been in up to now, my heart felt like it was about to burst. Once her stomach was full, Alice seemed to trust us a little and started talking about herself. Her mother hardly ever comes home, so she looks for food in the garbage dump. He's 7 years old, in the first grade of elementary school. But she doesn't have clean clothes, shoes, or a school bag. She's teased and bullied by her friends for smelling, so she doesn't go to school. The story we heard from the girl was shocking for us. Are you going to call the police? I like it here. I want to stay here. Neither my wife nor I had any doubts. Seeing the hardship little Alice had been going through, I hope she could at least have a warm, restful sleep tonight. Don't worry, you'll sleep with us tonight. We have a comfy bed for you, but will you go with us to the police station tomorrow? The officers are kind, so you'll be okay, and your mom might be worried too. Alice stayed silent for a while, then replied, I understand. I hope mom's worried about me, before drifting off to sleep. I wanted to tell her that her mom was probably worried too, but I couldn't. It's not easy to speak well of a mother who is likely neglecting her child. If I were to say something to comfort her on the spot here, she might end up getting hurt later. We spread out 3 beds in the carpeted room. When she got into bed, Alice seemed quite happy. This is amazing. I've never been in such a soft, warm bed. I hope mom isn't cold. I wish she could sleep in a warm bed too. The sight of her worrying about her mother, who left her without even giving her food, made my wife secretly cry. It was tough for me to keep from letting Alice see my teary eyes. The next day, we escorted Alice to the local police station. I can't forget her slightly lonely expression when we were parting. Are you guys saying bye-bye now? I held back tears and put on a smile. I hope we can meet again someday. The police will take good care of you, so there's nothing for you to worry about, okay? I told her, and Alice nodded. My wife hugged Alice for the last time. As we left the station, Alice waved at us with a smile. We had become so close to Alice overnight, and it was heartbreaking to say goodbye. On the way home from the police station, my wife was very worried about what would happen to Alice. We don't have any children, but we always loved children, and we used to say we wanted about 3. When we couldn't have any and went to the hospital, we found out that my wife has ovulatory dysfunction. Yet, there are ways to have children in modern times. We underwent fertility treatment with medication. Despite taking breaks occasionally, we went through 10 years of fertility treatment. But we couldn't have a child. At the 10-year mark, we decided to stop the fertility treatment. We didn't want to give up. But we were exhausted from the ups and downs of whether or not we could have a child. We decided to cherish our time as a couple, knowing that we've tried our best. We've been living quietly as a couple since then. That's why we couldn't stand parents who let their precious children feel cold and hungry. Later, we couldn't help but worry, so we contacted the police station where we had taken Alice. It turns out her mother had not been found after leaving home. It seemed Alice was going to a foster care facility. We were given the name of the facility since we were the ones who had found her. My wife and I immediately went to visit Alice. Many children were living away from their parents at the facility for various reasons. When we went to see her, Alice hugged my wife. They told me that mom might not come back. You guys aren't going to stay with me, are you? At her words, my wife and I were frozen, only able to deflect, unable to answer Alice's straightforward question. We were not relatives and couldn't live with Alice. But when we spoke with a staff member at the facility before leaving, we heard about foster parenting and adoption. When I felt this was it, I looked at my wife and she was looking at me seriously and nodded. It was a moment when we, as a couple, made a decision. We decided to learn about foster parenting and adoption that day and signed the necessary paperwork. In Alice's case, since she had just arrived at the facility, we needed permission from the family court to start the process for foster parenting or adoption. But the permission came without issue at a later date. Since then, we attended training and workshops to become foster parents, leading busy lives. During that time, we occasionally visited Alice. We had once asked her, "How would you feel if we wanted to live with you, to become your family in place of your mom?" Alice replied with a radiant smile, "I'd be really happy." That alone motivated my wife and me to keep going. Normally, a mother carries her child in her womb, nurturing them with care while the father supports to ensure the child is safely born. But we didn't have that process. We couldn't undergo the kind of struggles that typical parents have. That's why we combined our strength as a couple to overcome the busy days, holding the goal of making Alice smile more, to become her parents. But then, one day, an incident occurred. We received a sudden call from the facility staff. "Isn't Alice with you?" We were informed that Alice had run away from the facility. My wife and I hurried to search for her. Our house and Alice's old apartment are far from the facility. Just when we were fearing the worst, imagining that she might have been involved in an incident, we received a call that Alice had been found near the facility. She was apparently taken into police custody. We immediately went to see Alice, who had returned to the facility. Alice's face was wet with tears. "I wanted to go to Uncle and Auntie's place, to eat meals and take baths in the big tub again," she confessed. My wife and I, unable to say anything, hugged her small body tightly. After this incident, our desire to become a family with Alice grew even stronger. After things had settled down, I asked Alice to promise not to leave the facility on her own anymore because it was worrying. And then, I once again talked to the facility staff about wanting to take Alice into our care. After over half a year, the procedures were finally completed. My wife and I legally adopted Alice. 4 years later, my wife, Alice, and I were living happily. Alice was no longer suffering or feeling cold. She was attending school cheerfully every day, wearing a beautiful school backpack. However, a little before Alice's birthday, we received a letter from her biological mother. It was a request to meet her on her birthday. Without hesitation, Alice replied that she would like to meet her mom. To be honest, the speed of her decision made my wife and I anxious. But Alice is now in the 6th grade. She's at an age where she can make decisions for herself. We respected Alice's decision. We agreed that if Alice expresses a desire to live with her biological mother after this meeting, we would consider it positively. On the day of the reunion, Alice headed to the designated cafe by herself. My wife and I anxiously waited for Alice to return, and she did after about 3 hours, seemingly acting as usual. According to Alice, her biological mother had remarried. Her mom was smiling more happily than Alice had ever seen before. Alice was relieved to see her mom so happy because she had loved her mom even when she was left behind. So I told her, "I'm glad for you, Mom. I truly meant it when I said, 'Congratulations,'" Alice said, showing us a smile. "Forgiving someone who abandoned you is no easy task." I was reminded yet again of what a sweet, proud daughter we have. And looking slowly from one parent to another, Alice firmly declared, "Mom, Dad, thank you for finding me. Meeting my real mom made everything clear. I felt relieved after seeing her and immediately wanted to return to you both. This is where I belong." Seeing Alice so confident made us feel relieved that we'll be together from now on. After that, we decided to go buy a cake for Alice's birthday as a family. When I suggested holding hands, Alice, looking a little embarrassed, agreed, saying, "Just for today." I remember we held hands with Alice on the way to the bathhouse on the day when she was rummaging through the trash. But Alice's hand has grown so much since then. Alice will continue to grow. We don't know how long she'll want to hold hands with our parents. But no matter how big Alice gets, even if she no longer wants to hold our hands, she'll always be our precious daughter. We'll cherish this happy moment and continue to walk together as a family of 3. So, how was our story? Your subscription to our channel provides us with great motivation to continue sharing our journey. Until the next video, take care. My name is Scott McKenna, 36 years old. I work as a systems engineer. Due to certain circumstances, I changed jobs when I was 26. That being said, my profession hasn't changed. I'm still a systems engineer. I just escaped from the US, that's all. After graduating from college, I got a job at the IT company, which was my first choice. I think it was a promising start to my career. I was motivated about my work, my colleagues and superiors were kind, and it was a workplace with good communication. Yet, I quit the company without even waiting 3 years. To put it simply, the reason was a woman. Her name was Lucy Matthews, who was assigned to the same department as me when I joined as a newbie. She was, how can I put it, a woman with a unique atmosphere and beautiful. In a world where cuteness is mainstream, I think she belonged to the category of beauty. As we worked together as system engineers, we got closer and started dating. I remember being surprised and overjoyed when Lucy confessed her feelings to me. I'm a rather plain man and a nerd who can't engage in stylish conversation. On top of that, Lucy was a Madonna-like figure in the company, the center of attention. She was out of my league. I couldn't believe that this flower on a high peak would come to me. Even now, when I think back on it, it feels like a miracle. Lucy was a flashy kind of beauty. Of course, she was well aware of her own beauty. She knew very well how to present herself. Embarrassingly enough, I think I was so afraid of her disliking me that I ended up being at her beck and call and spent my days on edge. She quickly grew tired of me. I still remember her last words. "You might be capable at work, but you're a failure as a man. Being with you, Scott, was just boring." I couldn't hide my shock at the sudden breakup and contemptuous words. It's not often that one gets scolded directly like this, especially by a woman I love. This was harsh for me. Moreover, Lucy, who had dumped me harshly, was working at the desk every day, right next to me. I couldn't take it anymore. Please don't laugh at me for running away. I was so weak-minded. So, I left the company that I had been longing for. Since then, I haven't been in touch with Lucy. On the day I resigned, she had taken a paid vacation. It's been 10 years since I quit my job. I now stand in front of the building of the company I once adored. I feel as if I'm reviving the feelings I had as a first-year employee. The truth is, I didn't just leave the company in a hurry. I also fled from the US. It's a small industry. I thought it would be hard to face my former colleagues if I got a job. So, I decided to go to where nobody knows me. Foreign IT companies are truly meritocratic. I daringly left the US to test my skills. This decision was a great success. Despite my struggle with social skills, I was fortunate to find a company that highly valued my skills as a system engineer. Witnessing cutting-edge technology, I immersed myself in my work. A decade flew by in a blink. I returned to this company because an old colleague contacted me and asked me back. It was a rather forceful invitation, so I made a request. Initially, I wanted to be employed as a regular staff member. That was my request. By doing this first, I'm confident that this experience will be useful when I return to my original work. Thus, I became a new employee at the age of 36. The department I was assigned to was the same as before. But the atmosphere was not like before. Somehow, the employees seemed to be shrinking. Before, there should have been more freedom and active exchange of opinions. I wonder what the cause is. Coming back like this, you've got some thick skin. While surveying the floor from the entrance, I was spoken to from behind. A voice I couldn't forget. It's not like I came back because I wanted to. Lucy, listening to my reply, snorted discontentedly. She had the same floral perfume scent as before. Well, since you're a returnee, no matter who your former colleague is, no matter how old you are, you're a rookie here. You're at the very bottom. Don't forget that. Lucy, who said this arrogantly, had become a section manager. With Lucy in charge of this team, I became her subordinate. Lucy, confidently walking ahead with the clacking of her heels, was as confident as ever. What bothered me, however, was the attitude of my colleagues who were her subordinates. They seemed to be holding back around her. I carefully surveyed my surroundings and followed behind Lucy. Lucy introduced me as a returning rookie. Despite running away from this company, I came back. She introduced me as if mocking me. I'm Scott McKenna, nice to meet you. When I greeted, sparse applause broke out. When I was shown to my desk, I was surprised to see the one next to it. On the desk next to mine, there were 3 monitors, and in front of them, a small figure of a horse was displayed. Next to it was an eye massager and a shoulder-pounding stick. I could feel the strong presence. What? Is there something wrong with my desk? The one peering at me from below as she said this was a short, skinny girl. The inside of her wolf-cut hair was bleached white. The eyeliner around her eyes was flared like a cat's. Nice to meet you. I'm Emma Smith. Call me Emma. She stretched out her small right hand full of rings, and I shook it back. Her hand was as small as an elementary school student's. As soon as Emma took her seat, she put on white headphones. After that, she began to work at an astonishing speed. Thinking that she might only be assigned simple tasks, I stealthily glanced at Emma's screen. I let out a surprised voice involuntarily. What Emma was getting done at an incredible speed was not simple work. She's like solving intricate puzzles and codes with incredible speed. No doubt, the ace of this department is Emma. I'm certain of it. What's up? Interested in me? Emma, who I thought was only looking at her monitor, says this without changing her gaze. Get caught in the act of sneaking glances, I feel a bit guilty. You can look at me more openly if you want. She turns her face towards me and smiles. As she tells me this with an upward glance and a smile, I can only respond with a huh and scratch my head. By all means, feel free to compliment me. Being told this so refreshingly feels, well, refreshing. The atmosphere in the office has changed, but everyone's skills haven't diminished. That gives me a sense of relief. That said, it seems that our boss Lucy might be responsible for this change in atmosphere. On my first day, As a system engineer, the task given to me was stapling documents. The only time I touched a computer was to check company emails. Lucy intentionally kept me away from computers. In other words, she only assigned me to do miscellaneous tasks. Newbies make the coffee in this office. Since you, Scott, are the most recent and lowest in rank, please take care of the chores. Oh, and also please make a lunch reservation for us. Saying that, Lucy left a stack of cards from restaurants at my desk. Seeing this, Emma gives a wry smile. She always does this to new people. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask me, okay? I've been through it too. Being encouraged by Emma, I can't help but smile wryly too. Being encouraged by a girl almost 10 years younger makes me feel like I've regressed to my pitiful past. Thanks, that helps. As I bow my head in thanks, she looks at me as if she's discovered a rare creature. What? Is there something wrong? I quickly check myself, wondering if I've spilled coffee on my shirt or something. I find nothing wrong. No, it's not that. It's rare to hear a grown man say he's grateful to a young girl. That is new for me. She quickly puts her headphones back on and gets back to work. I touch my cheek, worried that I might have appeared pathetic. A week has passed, and I still haven't been given any proper work. Lucy begins to pile up chores from other departments on my desk. It seems like the tasks within our department weren't enough. Good morning, Mr. McKenna. Rubbing her sleepy eyes, Emma arrives at work just in time. She dumps her backpack on her desk and heads straight to the kitchen to make coffee. At that moment, I spot something under my desk. I pick it up and am taken aback. It's a flamboyantly pink and blue bikini top. I hurriedly look around. Luckily, it seems like no one has noticed. The mouth of Emma's backpack on her desk is carelessly left half open. It probably fell out of there. Even though I picked it up, I'm unsure of what to do next and start to act suspiciously. It would be best to sneak it back into the bag, but it would get complicated if Emma came back midway. Do you imagine things? As I'm wondering what to do, Emma's voice, tinged with a sigh, reaches my ears. Without thinking, I bolted up from my chair. Looking up at me with a teasing gaze was Emma. Her gaze made my heart flutter. I felt like I saw a feminine side to Emma, who usually doesn't show such traits. This was on the floor. In my flistered excuse, Emma brought her lips close to my ear once again. Reality is 100 times cuter than imagination. Finally, she let out a soft breath against my ear and I slid off the chair. There was a sultry musk scent that was too strong for the morning. It was the scent of Emma's perfume. When sitting next to her, it's a cute and gentle scent, but at close range, it turns to a sexy scent. That change in the gap made my heart pound violently. Being teased by a girl 10 years younger, I felt my seniority melting away. I'm going to a night pool with friends today. Thanks for picking this up for me. Emma extended her hand towards me, lost in thought. First, I handed her swimsuit back, then took her hand to get up. Isn't it dangerous for a young girl to go to a night pool dressed like that? It's not a good idea. Without thinking, I sounded like a worried father. Emma gave me a confused look before bursting into laughter. She said she had never even heard such a thing from her own parents and kept laughing. Embarrassed, I muttered, "Give me a break." "Okay, if you're worried, Mr. McKenna, I won't go. But in return, I expect a reward. I'll be looking forward to it." She pushed the swimsuit into the pocket of my suit, and Emma laughed. Now I can't go to the night pool. I was captivated by Emma, who was smiling mischievously like a naughty child. It was a shocking realization of what a truly charming little devil she was. After this day, Emma and I became considerably closer. Somehow, I felt like I was being rolled around in the palm of her hand. When Emma showed up for the dinner I invited her to instead of the night pool, I was breathless. She had a completely different atmosphere than at work. Her loosely tied-up hair had perfectly fallen strands, giving her a melancholy and sexy look. A black mini dress with Dr. Martens boots. Her lips, painted a cherry blossom color, gave off an innocent vibe, contrary to her attire. I was confused about who the real Emma was. I'm lucky to be invited to such a fancy restaurant. In a small voice matching the ambience of the restaurant, Emma murmured, "I have no idea what to order." She laughed helplessly, and I found myself chuckling too. "Do you have any food allergies or dislikes?" When I asked, she answered like an honors student, "No, I don't." She seemed a bit overwhelmed by the ambience of the restaurant and appeared nervous. It made me realize that at 26, she could still have endearing, innocent moments. When I finished ordering, Emma was unusually looking at me with eyes full of admiration. "What is it?" "McKenna, you can speak French. That's impressive." I seemed to surprise her when I spoke a bit of French with the chef. As we dined, I told Emma about my experiences working in various places abroad. Emma quickly fired off a barrage of questions, causing us both to repeatedly pause our meal. I was happy she was so interested, so I shared things I'd never told anyone before. At every new revelation, Emma either laughed and clapped her hands or seemed taken aback. "Feels like I'm doing all the talking. Let me hear about you, Ms. Smith." I had just made that remark when she told me to call her Emma. "If you don't call me that, I won't respond," she said, peering into my eyes. Swallowing nervously, I cautiously called her Emma. "Yes, Scott." With a smile and a tilt of her head, she responded, almost knocking me off my feet. "I don't know what to do. I can't win against this girl." That was the lesson I learned that night. "Looks like you're smitten with a young girl, isn't it?" One day, Lucy, whom I crossed paths with in the hallway, stopped and said out loud for everyone to hear. Hearing Lucy's voice, the surrounding employees started whispering and glancing my way. "Weren't you infatuated with me before? Changed your tastes now, have you, into younger women?" Lucy's teasing tone slightly ticked me off. I was surprised, too. "I thought you'd be long married and retired by now. That's why I returned to this company. I didn't expect you to be still on the market." At my words, Lucy's face turned bright red. The whispers around us grew louder. Lucy had already started spreading stories of my past among my colleagues. I had once come across her animatedly sharing stories of how I used to be head over heels for her. While it's true that I was infatuated with Lucy, I'm not ashamed of it. However, her exaggerations and smug way of narrating irked me. Being able to pay her back a bit felt somewhat refreshing. "What? Still on the market? That's rude. It's just that I haven't met a man who's worthy of me. Stop making fun of me." Lucy raised her voice in protest. Apparently, she is in a close relationship at the moment. She rambled on about her partner, a high flyer in the industry, being more wonderful than any men in our company, although no one had asked. It seemed like she didn't want people to think she was single. It's typical Lucy, who's always had a boyfriend without a break. There's no doubt she has someone now. But when it comes to marriage, men look at different aspects of a woman. Whether living together would be enjoyable or tiresome. In other words, while Lucy is popular but not married, she's great as a girlfriend, but not suitable for marriage. The current situation demonstrates that clearly. Well, that's the thing. Don't compare me with someone who can only handle young girls. Leaving behind such a dismissive remark, The visibly annoyed Lucy stormed off. I watched as she took out her anger on her subordinates while she left. Lucy's boyfriend. Yay, I know him. He's from the development department of our rival company. He's really cheesy and, well, creepy. During lunch break, Emma and I were nibbling on some sweet bread at our adjacent desks. When I asked about Lucy's boyfriend, Emma gave a rather disgusted look as she filled me in about the man. The fact that she herself had been hit on by him seemed to disgust her to her core, which I found amusing and couldn't help but chuckle. It's not funny. I think that guy is a schemer. He even tried to talk me into transferring and suggested I bring some information as a gift. The conversation quickly took a grim turn. What do you mean by that? I stopped nibbling on the pastry. Exactly what it sounds like. That man is trying every trick in the book to steal our development information. Emma crumpled up her bread back, and with a dangerous smile, she delivered her words. Given the circumstances, it appeared that Lucy was his current target. From what I gathered today, Lucy seemed quite smitten with him. I could only hope that my bad feeling wouldn't turn out to be true. I know who you really are, Scott. Nonchalantly revealing my secret as she looked at her computer monitor. What, you're joking, right? The words slipped out of my mouth, to which Emma gave a wicked grin. On her computer screen was my confidential transfer order, which hadn't been disclosed publicly. She seemed to have effortlessly bypassed the HR computer security and discovered the truth. She confessed she had been suspicious from the start. She seemed to have noticed me reading the program source code that was displayed on her computer monitor. Nobody in this department can read code like you can. I knew right away you were not just an ordinary Joe. I was left scratching my head, my cover blown. Now, shall we swiftly drain the pus and make this workplace more pleasant? Emma said in a mockingly polite tone, her face plastered with the mischievous grin she often wore. Roger that. I conceded, throwing up my hands in surrender. I decided to dive straight into the harsh treatment. I was able to catch the tail of the information leak quite easily. Lucy had always been careless. There were traces of her habits even in the program source code. She had copied the program of a recently developed system. And there were traces of her attempting to take it outside the company. More precisely, traces of her attempt to erase evidence of her actions were clearly left behind. Others might have overlooked it, but not me. Instead of making a public spectacle, we agreed to handle this matter discreetly and consult with higher-ups. There was also a slight degree of past compassion involved. Information leak. In our department, there's no way. That was Lucy's reaction when called by the boss and informed about the leak. Furthermore, she reportedly suggested that Emma might be the culprit if there was a leak. Her basis was that Emma disrespects me, her section manager. A clear personal grudge. This conversation took place the day I met with my boss. Unusually, Lucy, who usually leaves work on time, was staying late. Both Emma and I often work overtime. Emma prefers to wrap up her work at a good stopping point before heading home, while I typically get caught up in miscellaneous tasks. I occasionally glanced over at Lucy, who was unusually glued to her computer. I suspected she was staying behind with some ulterior motive. Are you guys not leaving yet? You're wasting electricity. Lucy yells at us from afar. Her voice carries a sharp edge of impatience. I can feel Lucy's anxiety as if I could touch it. She must be trying to cover up all her wrongdoings. But all the access codes have been rewritten by my coworker, Emma. Someone else might have been able to crack it, but breaking through a system that Emma has constructed is impossible for Lucy. Even from our seats, we can hear Lucy's sking. The next moment, A loud alarm blares from Lucy's computer, signaling an emergency. She's fallen into the trap I've set. Upon hearing the noise, the security guard rushes into the floor. Employees who had been working overtime in other departments also gather around. I didn't do anything. It just started going off by itself. It's a bug, a bug. Who the hell programmed this? Lucy stands up, pointing at her computer. The alarm continues. Then, Emma steps smoothly to the computer and silences the alarm in an instant. As soon as the noise stops, Lucy's face relaxes. And in the next moment, she points at Emma and starts yelling. "This is your doing. You're the one who leaked the information too, aren't you? You set up this trap because you didn't want me investigating you." Lucy doesn't get to finish her sentence. Because the boss showed himself among the gawkers. "Lucy, this isn't a good look. You are the main culprit behind the data leak, aren't you? Falling into this trap is proof of that." The boss explains to Lucy that all the evidence was gathered in my internal investigation. Lucy, shocked, looks at me. "You're lying. Scott doesn't have these skills. What could a good-for-nothing errand boy do?" Lucy glares at me, then rounds on the boss. The boss sighs in exasperation. "Scott, I'm glad we followed your plan. I never expected to catch such a big fish." Lucy looks at me, dumbfounded, as the boss speaks to me amicably. She clearly hadn't expected that I was working with the boss. "Scott is a talent we invited to our company as a supervisor. He's my right-hand man, whom I brought in from England." At the boss's words, Lucy is stunned into silence. "We'll notify you of your punishment later. For now, go home and refrain from work until we get in touch." Upon hearing the boss's words, Lucy collapses on the spot. Later, Lucy gets transferred to a small branch office in Nebraska. I end up taking over Lucy's position. Emma complained about her desk being moved away from mine, but there's nothing that could be done about that. Although the ending left a sour taste in our mouths, the atmosphere at work changed completely. I think it's getting closer to how it was when I was around. A workplace with a good flow of communication, where lively and candid exchanges of opinion are possible, and performance quickly starts to improve. Everyone on the floor acknowledges that Emma is contributing to this change. I think we can continue to work together like this forever. That's what I was leisurely thinking. But Emma isn't someone who would settle here. A year later, she receives an offer to study abroad in Japan. Bring home the latest technology and information. That is her mission. The company is covering all the expenses for her study abroad. She had absolutely no reason to refuse. When this conversation came up, I was shaken. We never openly acknowledged it, but we consider each other as lovers. I lack the capacity to cheerfully wave goodbye as my irreplaceable partner sets off across the sea. How can I make her stay? That's all I could think about. Even when I'm with Emma, all I can do is contemplate how to make her stay in the US, making it impossible to enjoy our time. Should I propose marriage as a last resort? I'm disgusted by myself for even considering such a low method. Emma laughs as if she sees right through my thoughts. "Hey, are you going to be lonely if I go to study abroad?" Emma, who has always been one step ahead of me, stops and turns to look at me. "Of course I'll be lonely, that's a given." Emma chuckles happily upon hearing my reply. I thought this was the only moment to mention marriage. Just when I gathered my courage and tried to voice it, Emma's slender finger touched my lips. "No, not now. When I come back from Japan, then you can move on me. I'll say yes right away." Emma looks at me with unusually serious eyes. After she finishes her sentence, she gives me a soft smile. I raise both my hands in a surrendering pose. I've never won against Emma anyway. I get it, I promise. And so, I sent Emma off. 4 years later, I'm waiting for Emma at JFK Airport. It's not like me, but I've prepared a bouquet of flowers. I've had my opening line decided since 4 years ago. Welcome back. Will you marry me? My heart feels like it's about to leap out of my mouth. The electronic display announces the arrival of Emma's flight. It's only a little longer. In a little while, a new chapter of our story will begin. Of course, the ending is planned to be a happy one. How did you find today's story? Your subscription and likes will be an encouragement for my content creation. I look forward to your comments. See you in the next video.